book, so it's lovely to see so many of you here on such a lovely sunny day. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this poetry reading by Kathleen McCracken and Catherine Graham. Before we start, I would like to thank Patsy and the Linen Hall Library for hosting and all the staff that work so hard behind the scenes to make events like this possible. And thank you to all of you here today for attending. Your presence and energy are a huge part of what makes readings like this special. So I was chatting with Kathleen a few days ago, and she told me that it was in this very room that Catherine and Kathleen met for the first time. And it just shows you never know where a chance meeting might lead and what friendships you might make along the way. So one of my favorite poets, Joy Harger, writes that poetry can bring rain, can make someone fall in love, can hold the grief of a nation. The greatest poetry often comes from a place of intense emotions, as words become vessels for euphoria and sorrow and everything in between. It is this shared understanding that both poets reading today have in common, an unyielding emotional connection that breathes life into their verses. Whether that's walking dreamscapes and embracing vulnerability and grief as a transformative process towards healing in Catherine's collection, Ether, or creating a narrative for the so-called freaks and outcasts in Kathleen's Mooncalves collection with a profound dignity and empathy. And so it is my pleasure to introduce our first poet, Kathleen. Kathleen McCracken is a Canadian poet and the author of 8 collections of poetry, including Blue Light, Bay and College, which was shortlisted for the Governor-General's Award for Poetry, and a bilingual English and Portuguese edition entitled Double Self-Portrait with Mirror, New and Selected Poems. She was a finalist for the W.B. Yeats Society of New York Poetry Competition, the Montreal International Prize for Poetry, the Walrus Poetry Prize, and the CBC Poetry Prize. In 2019, she won the Seamus Heaney Award for New Writing. From 1992 to 2022, Kathleen was a lecturer in creative writing and contemporary literature at Ulster University. As someone who studied under Kathleen's tutelage, as an eager poet myself, I can verify that she was the pillar of creative writing at Ulster University. Today, I am delighted to call her a dear friend. Kathleen's poetry emits a remarkable passion for language, etymology, and a fearless inclination to stretch words beyond their conventional boundaries. She has the ability to show how even the slightest linguistic nuances can carry immense significance, unraveling the depths and intricacies of human experience. A perfect example of this is her upcoming exhibition on a hybrid piece that mixes photography and poetry to tell a story in one word: Mustang. A part horse, part cowboy shapeshifter that meanders across the American landscape. These very precise poems are paired with stunning photographs by John T. Davis. Now, I've had a sneak peek, and I'm going to say you don't want to miss it. Today, she'll be reading some poems from her forthcoming collection, Something About Horses. Please give a very warm welcome to Kathleen McCracken.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Amanda, for that extremely generous introduction. Appreciate that. And thank you to Patsy, whoever you are back for having us here today. It's great to be reading in the Linen Hall again, and particularly alongside Catherine, who's just launched her new and selected collections. Always a landmark to have a new and selected. So congratulations on that. I'm delighted to be here with you. It is true that we met in this room back in 2017, and we've done several readings since, and a lot of talking about poetry and other things. It's really nice to be here with you today. I'm going to start off, this is a kind of, always start off with this poem piece, so some of you may have heard it before, but I've lived here for 30 years in Northern Ireland. It's very much home to me, and yet I suppose the true home is back there across the Atlantic in Canada. And this was a poem, it's a kind of a chant or an incantation, I guess, that explores that idea of the way that no matter where you are, you're always seeing the home place or through the lens of where you are at that moment. In other words, what I see here in Ireland, I often read as a version of something I know from back home. So it's just kind of an exploration of that immigrant experience. And there's a term here that you might know, shatter zones. Shatter zones are borderlands, or they're often areas of conflict, such as the border that we have here. It's called Today I Should Be in Medicine Hat. Medicine Hat is in southwestern Alberta. Today I should be in Medicine Hat. Inside the oak tree, there is a white birch. Inside the sallows, there are cottonwoods. Inside the gale's force, there is a tornado. Inside the magpies, there are cardinals. Inside the simmentals, there are bison. Inside the breakers, there are drifts of snow. Inside Dundalk, County Louth, there is Dundalk, Ontario. Inside the Mournes, there are the Rockies. Inside Erinrod, Erin, there is Canadian Pacific. Inside the Erins, there is Haida Gwaii. Inside the Coracle, there is a kayak. Inside peat bricks, there are maple cords. Inside the Wellingtons, there are mucklucks. Inside the Tarn, there is quicksand. Inside the loch, there is a lake. Inside Thole, there is grit. Inside you, there is Ring Hattie. Inside me, there is Medicine Hat. Inside one story, there is another story. Where they bleed together, those two stories. Someone is sawing a fiddle, someone is striking a drum. Someone is saying Belfast, someone is saying Pashalaka. Someone is building a famine wall, someone is felling timber. Someone is boarding a coffin ship, someone is born Métis. Someone is saying Emigre, someone is saying come from away. Someone is touching down, someone is kissing the ground. Someone is clearing customs, someone is texting home. And the border lines are shatter zones with our migrant names inside them. This poem, I guess, has to do with borderlands as well. A couple of years ago, I spent some time in New Mexico, and you can't but be there and be unaware of and have concern for what's going on at the border with the refugees, illegal immigrants attempting to cross over from Mexico to the US. So this poem was just written in the wake of that, being there and thinking about those people. It mentions a Tamalpay. Mount Tamalpay is in the Arid Hills in Northern California, or the coastal range. It's the highest peak in that coastal range. This is called Tucson Boots. We bought the red boots in Tucson, the pearl gray Stetson in Oklahoma City, the beaded buckskin jacket in Casper, the hand-tooled wild rose billfold in El Paso. No receipt, paid cash. We were at liberty. Wearing those red boots, I think about how cold the desert is at night and what it must be like to hole up under spiky creosote. No coat or shoes or water. Would you put on the Stetson? Do you consider roiling rivers, coyotes, or the implications of summer snow on the Barranca? We are at liberty. Colombian coffee, clementines from Spain. The morning papers itemize the valuables los inmigrantes leave behind. Hoodies, t-shirts, a Yankees cap, twin rosaries, a wedding ring, a tooth. Report how border guards cut sign, spotted 17, whole extended family, barefoot, then lost the trail. Nothing where they looked, but nets of starlings, funneling their way north to Tamalpay. Just have some water and then carry on. Speaking of red, the next poem is actually called Red Dresses, and this has a bit of background to it that I suppose I would need to tell you about. It's an ekphrastic response to an installation art project called the Red Dress Project, or the Redress Project, which was created by the Métis artist Jamie Black. And Black's work draws attention to one of my home country's, one of Canada's most distressing social crises, that is the epidemic, and I don't think that's too strong a word, the epidemic of racialized and gendered violent crimes against Indigenous women, that is First Nations, Métis, and Inuit women across the country. In March 2011, Jamie Black displayed 500 red dresses on coat hangers, indoors and outdoors, at the University of Winnipeg, and then she subsequently mounted that installation across Canada and the United States. And these empty dresses that were sort of swaying in the wind were meant to represent the lost women, the absence of the women. Many are missing without ever having had their bodies discovered or anything known about what happened to them. Well, the color red, she talked about wanting to evoke both the violence they'd suffered and their living vitality. So the voice in the poem is positioned as that of a white woman who is visiting the installation, sort of talking to herself, thinking back to her own experience of her mother making a red dress for her when she was a girl. So it's called Red Dresses. On your mother's clothesline, a red dress, sleeveless, low cut, fluted, empty. It shimmies in the 0 miles per hour December freeze. Hung from winter bare birch trees, from wrought iron railings, from lamp posts, in parklands, in museum plazas, in gallery gardens, in campus courtyards, in front yards, in backyards, on river banks, on roadsides, on highways of tears. From Prince Rupert to Iqaluit, from Kamloops to Winnipeg, they twist in breezes, they breathe, 500 red dresses. Lace-collared, open-backed, flounced, floor-length, scoop-necked, strapless, A-line, pencil, mini, midi, first date dresses. Each one is a girl, each one is a woman, missing, murdered, disappeared. Each one is a mother, sister, cousin, daughter, auntie, wife, friend, beloved. Each one is Cree, Salish, Anishinaabe, Blackfoot, Niska, Innu, Métis. Some were shot, some were stabbed, some were beaten, some were raped. Some were walking home, some were leaving home. Some were jingle dancers, some were shift workers. Some wore high heels, some wore new jeans. Some had hoop dreams, some had children waiting. Some had nothing to their names but their own names: Gloria, Helen, Belinda, Tanya, Isabella, Barbara, Amber, Tina. Some were 14, some were 15, some were 20, some were almost 31. Red is lifeblood, red is female, red is the violence happening. Red is the color their spirits see. It calls them back to be heard. It says, look. It says, stop. It says, this is not okay. Do not intrude. Do not walk away. Touch the hem of each red dress. Let its texture return you to your mother's side, her white hands fluent as snow geese threading Thanksgiving skies, where she cuts and stitches, washes and irons the red dress she is making, the one you put on for your sister's wedding, your best friend's birthday, your parents' ruby anniversary. Those settled spaces, their perimeters edged in safety. Brushing the limbs of wild mountain ash, a red dress, let it say, listen. Let it say their names, the girls, the women, each one a story you are learning to understand. Let it say absence marks presence. Let it say we are here. I have a list. What's next? Right, yes, I've written probably upwards of 30 poems about my father, Robert Ivan McCracken, who passed on in 2010. So this book, The Moon Selected, which came out several years ago now, has some of them, but I've written quite a few since that. So I'd like to read at least a few of those because they kind of all go together. What to say about them? I think of them as sort of portraits, you know, like each one looking at a different aspect of his character. When my father died of cancer, and when he was in his last few months, he said, you know, whether or not to go ahead with chemotherapy, had that choice, and he said, yeah, okay, I want to live. And of course, we knew that wasn't going to be possible for too much longer, but I think in my thinking, most of people do live on in the writing, the describing of them in some ways. And drawing these portraits was, for me, a way of fulfilling that wish, I suppose. So this is called The Gauntlet Road, and it's quite a special poem for me because it was the last poem of mine that he knew about, that he read. I read it to him. And it names some of the places in the area where I'm from, southwestern Ontario. The Gauntlet Road. My father is driving north through snow from Orangeville onto Primrose, Shelburne, Dundalk, where beyond the big bend at the cemetery, it's a straight run all the way. The old road scored into the mind inside his mind, like some primal planisphere, or the photo of his daughter stapled to the pickup's visor. But tonight it's falling heavy, and he's flanked by drifts and stark wind devils, tailed by blizzards heading into whiteout. The weatherman reporting more to come, a storm front bearing down across southwest Ontario. So he's looking out for signs, familiar shapes to guide him, since the center and the shoulder lines have dissolved in roiling columns of hypnotic, superfine rain flake. And he's thinking, what would Freddie do? Freddie, who signed up and made it back from the war without a scratch, who's not his brother, but is more a brother than the two who were, wondering would he pull over and keep the engine ticking, or hold to driving, snowblind. And all the while there's this war inside his head, in the head inside his head, over how he doesn't know what Freddie or the rest would do. Not his father scaling dirt tracks in his maroon Model A, or his son whose red Camaro kind of surfs the 401, because they're not here. It's himself alone this time, dicing the ice-stung blacktop he's driven half his life. To that flare he's got a bead on, up ahead, but still a ways off to the left. That might be marsh gas, foxfire, daybreak, porch light, or another winter barn gone up in flames. And the horses, those same ones the Talbot kids rode bareback through last summer, spooked and out there too, running just like him, the Gauntlet Road. I could see horses. My father's voice was Utah copper, honeysuckle gold, fine-tuned, viola, not violin. A radio voice, first pilot calm, air traffic controller confident, cargo in the hold. His local intonations, laced with faraway, translated dance steps into river mouth. That brash, unabashed western swing, flash like floods. When he spoke, I could see horses, high-stepping Tennessee walkers, more often a quiver of arrows, quarrels invariably hitting the mark. What am I doing for time, Amanda? Okay, yeah. It becomes a timeless zone up here when you're doing this, so just shout out when it's time to go. Well, I guess like almost all of us were constantly preoccupied with thinking about the state of the planet, crisis of the climate crisis. And I read a couple of poems along these lines. I know we're all at it, as we should be. But this particular one, I'd like to read for a friend who's here today, Ms. Murphy, who's visiting us from Australia. She's a wonderful poet in her own right. I hope you got out to hear her at the Dove Care. It's called Kangaroo Island. And in 2020, as you'll know really well, there were terrible bushfires there. Kangaroo Island is off the south coast of Australia and southwest coast of Australia. And it's a protected nature reserve, so there are all kinds of rare species there. And it's often referred to as an ark, because these particular species have been safe there. So I was really disturbed by the imagery that was coming through. I have a friend in Adelaide too who was sending me pictures of what had happened to Kangaroo Island, which is devastating. So I wrote this piece on Kangaroo Island. In dream time, the Ramajeri called it Karta, Island of the Dead. In creation's wake, eons, salt horizons, glacial melt, fashioning this arc, buoyant plenitude, unmoored from the mainland. What miracles occur in isolation? Short-beaked echidna, tamar wallaby, pygmy possum, platypus, glossy black, cockatoo, bandicoot and dunnart, heath guana, nanagum, bee colonies, alpine ligurians, indigenous green carpenters. Think, the island is its own ecosphere, pristine biome skirting the brink of a sixth extinction. Witness something more than fire season. Bushland tinder kindling CO2 and lightning strikes, snake-whipped tornadoes, high noon sky hemorrhage, flame furrows to the beaches, cramped dinghies, internal refugees. Witness eucalypts combusting, koalas euthanized, corpse calves, corpse lambs, scorched joys cut from pouches, the army digging trenches, crown canopy, a cinderscape. Think, the island is an index, exit we are entering, praised by the wailing of species, bound for no planet after this one. Another one along those lines, different part of the globe, this is called Nanook, and you've probably heard of Nanook of the North, but the Inuit word for board there is Nanook, or at least what it means within the kind of cosmology, Nanook as the master of bears, polar bear seen as the master of bears, because he, or it, allowed hunters to either catch game or to be denied game. There's a word here you might have heard, tuktuit, which is an Inuit word for caribou. And a female polar bear is called a sow. You probably do know that. All bears, female bears are called sows. So, Nanook. The master of bears is brokenhearted. Hunters collect antler and bone, move through darkness, touch the gaunt in one another's winter faces. By Kulak lamps, the sculptor carves snowy owls from soapstone, makes the glowing wings yellow. Caribou traverse sea ice, tucked to it. Singing turns the herds to constellations. Reports arrive from countries to the south, regions where no animal survives the sun's presence. Stark news of isolation, glacier calving, meltwater. Drone photographs to document the movements of a grounded sow. The planet judders, unmoored Polaris drifts in vanished skies. Nanook, master of bears, is brokenhearted. Okay. How much time do I have left? 5 minutes? Another 1 minute? Okay, right, I'll do the last one, which I wanted to have lots more. But anyways, I'll skip to the last one. I want to read this one because I wrote it for, I wrote it for Catherine, but I wrote it after reading her collection, The Celery Forest, which I absolutely loved. It's a great title. I was saying to her yesterday, The Celery Forest. I wish I had a book called The Celery Forest. This is called Candle Trees, and candle trees is an old name for candelabra, candle trees. And it's, I guess, a poem about lost fathers and mothers and how we're both writing about, absent parents and how they never really knew us, so we're always there as guiding spirits. So Candle Trees. I read her poems late at night, rarely at noon. Though I looked for a brother, she talks like a sister, sharing secrets under the summer's tarpaulin or the skin formed over a lake in winter. Once upon a time, we saw the same dome shine at the edge of a forest neither of us was permitted to enter. She told me how velvet hot its antlers would burn should I reach out and touch, the way a father's or a mother's hands might proffer a pair of horn-tipped candelabra, candle trees, their 10 points a humming constellation, guiding us back to the highway. Thanks very much.
Wonderful, wasn't it? Thank you very much, Kathleen. We are now delighted to have Katharine Graham, who is also Canadian and visiting us for a brief period. Poet and novelist, Katharine Graham's hybrid memoir, Ether, an out-of-body lyric, was a finalist for the Toronto Book Award, Trillium Book Award, and won the CAA Fred Kerner's Book Award. The Celery Forest was named a CBC Best Book of the Year. Her debut novel, Query, won an IPPY Gold Medal for Fiction and was a finalist for the Certain Women's Book Award. She leads the Toronto International Festival of Authors Book Club, co-hosts the Hummingbird Book Podcast, and teaches creative writing at the University of Toronto. Honestly, I don't know where you find the time to write. Put flowers around us and pretend we're dead. New and selected poems, as we've said, has just been released. My first experience of hearing Katharine's poems was last week at the Heaney Place, and among the collection of captivating poems, a leash of deer etched itself into my mind as I was driving home. Now, I was very fortunate enough to avoid any physical deer, but the vivid depiction of the satellite ears and the unsettling sound of a knock on the door persisted in my imagination. And isn't that why we read and listen to poetry? To be captivated by something? Katharine writes with a profound insight, and her poetry delves into the mysteries of mortality, exploring the boundaries that separate and connect us as human beings. Her poetry evokes a deep sense of contemplation on the fragility and resilience of the human condition. Grief becomes a catalyst that ignites her poetic journey and brings us, as readers, hope. I'd like to thank you all again for listening, and please give a very warm welcome to Katharine Graham.
Thank you, Amanda, for that beautiful introduction. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes? Excellent. It's really an honor to be back here at the Linden Hall Library and to be sharing the stage with Kathleen. Yes, that is where we met. So I love sort of circle moments and return. So it's a return of many things for me, a return to this stage, a return to Kathleen, and also new people as well. And so I'd like to also thank Patsy and Belinda and the team here at the Linden Hall Library. Thanks to all of you for coming out. I know it's a beautiful day out there, and I packed the sun, so I released it. So it's all a big plan, and here we are in the sun. So, and yeah, it's also a return too for me because I began my poetry journey here in Northern Ireland. So I'm really honored to be sharing this book, some poems from this book, Put Flowers Around Us and Pretend We're Dead, New and Selected. I remember as a young wannabe poet coming to this very library with my notebook and reading poems, trying to write poems, having wonderful coffee in the coffee shop. So it's, again, a big circle moment for me, so thank you for being part of it. Thank you, Kathleen, for the beautiful reading, and Amanda for the lovely introductions. So I never had any plans to be a poet. Was a psychology student at McMaster University, and my parents died fairly close to one another. My mother died my first year of cancer, and then my father died my last year in a late night car accident. So I was on my own, and thankfully poetry came along and found me, and I found poetry. And we lived beside a water-filled limestone quarry, and the quarry was filled with water. And I think about that quarry a lot. I no longer live there, but it has served my imagination and my creative journey. It's really been a force for me. And I think about how a quarry is a blasted landscape, just like grief blasts us, and there's a hole there. And yet that hole fills with new life. And for me, that new life was poetry. So I'm really grateful for that. So I'm going to begin with a poem titled Back to the Quarry. This surface for long-legged spiders once absolved teen skin. Plunge into the limestone museum. Mingle with rusty machinery sunken by a triggered spring. Let sunfish nibble toes and raise the fear of turtle snaps. Pursue pathways carved by perch, catfish, bass. Dive in, turn to water before it freezes. That last line actually serves the beginning of my novel Quarry, so it's interesting when your work speaks to you and kind of guides you along. That's been the case for me, so I've been grateful for that too. And this next poem now takes us to the underworld. It's sort of plays with the Demeter-Persephone myth and is titled Chthonic. The lilacs have risen to solo in the corner orchestra of greens. Purple odors permeate the branched alveoli of my lungs. I slip through the briars, listen to wind shaking the canopy, stand in place till I'm pulled through the port of entry. I fight, play possum, but my wit leaks as lilacs rust from bone ivory. Death seeps. I hold my breath to tease the light they say is coming, but like the trees, I darken the forest. You must find the hidden passage inside the earth's purse. Chewing worms, burrowing owls, nothing is still. Not even my mind turning to brain afield and fallow. The earth slides over my face. I see the exchange that's happening. A dead mother wants out. Her red hair rises with the wings of insects, and I sink further than the lair of the fox. Thank you, Amanda, for mentioning Unleash of Deer. I'm actually going to share that poem with you now. I was touring the UK, and this was, of course, pre-COVID. And at one point, we were reading at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. And in between readings and so on, I wandered into this little gift shop. And what caught me attention was a coaster. And on it was the collective noun, Unleash Deer. And I had never heard that. And the deer have, I guess, been my spirit animal. And it's interesting too, because it's a love-hate as well, because there's sort of the mystery of whether my father swore to miss a deer the night that he died. So I've written about that. There's sort of the not knowing and the knowing. But so when I saw this coaster, I thought I have to have it. Thankfully, coasters are tiny to put in your suitcase and bring back. And this is the poem that resulted, Unleash of Deer. Untamable creatures, spotted as trout lily, camouflaged umber, tawny branch with satellite ears, air cut to the heartbeat of the ground. Extended line between sun, dawn, moon, dusk, a leash of deer. Which sight brought forth the first, allowed leggy form to lift, up and off the forest floor, into white-tailed leaps or red, or roe. No matter. Kill, suffocation, quick throat slit, kill and stop the leash of deer from spreading out. So when that fall night rears, a father driving home, one road away from home, no cloven-hoofed ungulate on Stone Mill Road, parting from a field of parting corn, from stalk and husk and rustle beside a frog-thick croaking ditch to trigger panic, the swerve. A father would have made it back to bed, exhaling o's of alcohol through graying shades of stubble, and a daughter would awaken to the muffle of his morning snores through cedar walls, and not the 3 a.m. knocking at her bedroom door, the waiting cop. So of course I don't want to kill the deer, but you can do these things in poems and so on. I love the deer, but you know, that one that night, well anyway, yeah, there you go. So I'm really interested in the fine line between the real and the imagined. So many of the new poems in this selection play with that. So I'll read a few of those now too. This poem is titled, Consider the Scythian Lamb. We reason about unreasonable things. The ratio of a hippogriff's wings to its body, if it can fly. If the Yeti is more likely than elk to exist when we know they both don't. Consider the Scythian lamb. Seed breaks through, roots stalk their slow crawl into green networks towards the nourishing air. Lengthen with sun's ease. Out climbs a lamb, hooves made of parted hair. If tiny crystals form close to the Earth's surface, they form diamond dust. My antler heart grows hooves. I follow footprints from the pack. Find shelter in a drunken forest. What species isn't at risk? Insulating properties of snow keep me warm. Trapped air between each flake. With body heat and earth transfer heat, my home becomes a snowbank. It's not the hare's scream that haunts, it's the antecedent silence. Passage. There you were, floating beneath before passing through the mist we could not face. Crab apples, red pebbled jewels, rainwater seeds, light drying to come out. Yolk, yellow bubble, can you hear the singing? Waterfalls to where the heart aches, a ladder slowly lifts and the birds hurl themselves up. Saying this, I read this poem at the Heaney home place, and I just love their like little bird bombs popping up there with all their feathers. I just love birds. So this next poem actually takes on the persona of Medusa and is titled Medusa's Lament. My rage has never belonged to me. Phallic hisses snake from my scalp, remind my powers to turn men to stone. From the deepest marrow I've become beauty ugly, vital, fresh. My mother rose from stone. Trilobites fossilized her into shape. Stone, buried want, to be cradled back into her crevice, to be fluid, contained. I'll read the title poem of this collection, Put Flowers Around Us and Pretend We're Dead. For many years, I've had lines of poetry come to me in dream, and I've finally gotten smart enough to have a notebook beside my bed. And sometimes you get those entire poems, but you can never write them all down. Some of you, I'm sure, experience this too. So I'll scribble them down in my half stupor, and then hope I can read them in the morning. That's the one thing. And then the next thing, did I turn the page, or did I just write over the next line over the next? Then I can't read either, but I have managed to figure out some kind of system in that random way. And then this voice wanted to come through these dream lines. So this became the title poem, and this sort of apocalyptic voice, but I still feel there's hope here. So it's titled, Put Flowers Around Us and Pretend We're Dead. The moon arcs in and out, playing form. Stars wrap our fate, while intruder dreams signal, come back. They hold our stability with quickened steps. Stand where grass weaves basket strands, make the center heave, the pinched earth speak, before thoughts erase and we have no names. Fixed on the busy, you miss the owl winter, the who cold, crizzling lake. Raindrops inside snowdrops, when our shoes sprout hello flowers, cold lips pucker, speak. What to do but follow this thread, wind circular words to chain our necks. A necklace without clasps means another light's not listening. To think story is to construct from that other realm, where jade water cools, fire's friction. Pockets where pleasure finds memory. Take this nosegay, touch intuition, before we float off the page. Now go past sentence, air, sheet, shatter, absorbed by grasses and creatures scurrying there. Viral green points down, we watch the swarm. Swan's neck quickens to question, her wings snow-blinding flaps. Nest birds have it, twiggy cup to sink into after cracking. The rub that brought forth twine and twig weaves the cradle. Head naked like a freshly hatched bird, moist with dew from the worm field. What moves in tawny spurts jolts. Silence rearranges, it does not mend. Seed, but no bloom. Unraveling defies gravity, false to think otherwise. Fools, we have a future to hatch. When roots shoot out the sun-calling art of escape, leaf, sepal, petal, the sun plays hide and seek. Silence is a kind of light. Scratch light to a rain fleck level. Twitch strategic to inhabit submission. Repetition renews. Upland by the railroad tracks, eggs disguised as stones. Slip past daylight to a time held by skein of old stars. Past evening, past waiting. Enough, never enough, until pulled to flight or sleep, and a dog bounds helplessly wet for a tossed stick he cannot find. Part of the song where the dead come from. They dream through us. Grapes raisin into light. The terroir glistens in our cups. Re-entry without thought, want mix. Minds wax and wane. We hold the dead's moon. Full, not full, forever light trapped. Framed by earth's tender angle. We carp the dead's voices through our dream sounds. Echoes in morning, frost glass. So I teach creative writing, as has been mentioned, and I tell my students to keep a notebook. Just so you know, those things that come to you, you think you're going to remember them, and you never do. So if you write them down, at least you can go back to them. So for the longest time, I had this quote by Tilda Swinton in my notebook. I'm sure we all know who Tilda Swinton is. And she was asked, where is it you would like to be buried? And this was her response. In a shallow grave of sand, done up to the nines in a huge flower chiffon dress, stretched out like a sail on a beach in the Hebrides, pecked to pieces by birds. It's a poem in and of itself, but it inspired me to play with those lines and do sort of a form called a glossa. It's not quite a glossa, but that's where you take other poets' words and weave them in. So you'll hear these lines repeated now in a poem that I'll share titled The Buried. Oh, when I was reading in Edinburgh, I'll just say this too. This gentleman came up to me after and he said, oh, I just had lunch with Tilda the other day. I'll send you her poem, or I'll send her your poem. And so I guess Tilda has my poem. I'm still waiting to hear from Tilda. But, you know, that was quite an honor. The Buried. The breeze soothes the summer's burning as it lifts off the lake, but the hot sand holds the white heat. So we burrow our toes to find the cooling. Bury me in a shallow grave of sand. I lie back and you shovel beach over my pale body. I let the itch of it enter me. It's as if 1,000 insects have taken free rein and clothed me in their stings. I am dressed up to the nines now, a level away from all that I once knew. Ahead, but when I close my eyes, I become the buried. A cloud passes over in a huge flowery chiffon dress, and the sand is the smell of my new skin. The grainy case of my lungs pumps through homes and crowds. I am the sound of the underneath, stretched out like a sail in a photograph. I am pure verb going nowhere. Even the wind can't move me. The sand bars my body from the water's rise, the beach in the Hebrides, where time is carved back. Landlocked to the hours of sand that has no hours, only bones. I'm not afraid of you leaving. I'm only afraid of being pecked to pieces by birds. Kathleen mentioned the Celery Forest. I was diagnosed with breast cancer the same age that my mother was when she died from the disease, and she accompanied me on the journey through dreams, visitations, and memories. And I didn't think I was going to write about it, but I came across this painter's work of a girl standing at the entryway of a giant celery forest, sort of like a topsy-turvy world that you enter in with Alice in Wonderland. And I know many of us know people who've gone through it, probably people in this room have gone through that. I'll just share one of the poems from the Celery Forest now. So celery makes an appearance in this poem too, and this poem is titled MRI. No metal implants or fragments, a long fibrous stalk. You signed consent, remove jewelry, face down through the donut hole, tapering into leaves. Contrast material running through your veins. Magnets, pinnet to bipinnet with rhombic leaflets, still, lie still. You've been given earphones, a padded table. Seeds are broad ovoids, cushioned openings for breasts to hang. Grown in an open garden, thumping, clicking, knocks and taps. The celery's a cleansing tonic, whirs with car accident screeches, a father's skull, mother's mouth, wide range of cultivars. The technician stands in a nearby room, inside a seed, inside a small fruit. So this next poem is in memory of a guerrilla gardener who went to wild spaces and even made them more beautiful. And this man was my uncle, so this poem is dedicated to the memory of Bruce Gillingham, and the poem is titled Wildflower. The condo took him away from his garden. Pots on the balcony, not the same. By the lake, a field with few wildflowers called to him. He drove to where the city kept spreading. Holes where other condos would rise. Oxeye daisy, Queen Anne's lace, butter and eggs, chicory. He transplanted his finds along the waiting edges. Fox, skunk, and rabbit watched, but not the passers-by, as he dug more holes to root the living. Growth took, so he planted seeds, nothing invasive, just more of the already there to richen texture and color. Some milkweed to coax monarchs back. I see him, tending, tamping, close to 90, down on his knees. So just a couple of more. This one has a bit of a story before I share the poem. Apparently one of my biggest fans is a little girl and we've never met. And her mother reads her my poems at bedtime, which God help the girl for that. But anyway, she's apparently fond of my book, Winter Kill. And one day I got this text from her mother. And she said, "Oh, did I tell you about my daughter's winter kill idea? She decided, since we drive Perth Road every day and see lots of poor animals who've met untimely ends, that there should be an imaginary world, Narnia for ghost animals." And she said she'd call it Winter Hill. I asked where she got it. She said, "Catherine Graham's book, but I changed kill to hill, so not to remind them of sad things." How is that not charming? And it inspired my imagination, thankfully. So the poem is, of course, titled Winter Hill. The heat glossing their backs. Moon licking the river white. They thrive at night. Born nocturnal, they smell the rub of dew slipping out. To see through darkness blocked by moon, cloud, star. Where is the water? The bullfrog knows, the spring peeper. The growing chorus itches the air. There is no gate to pass, just a metallic scent they cannot detect. What hits, kills. Curled into carcass rot on beds of gravel and dirt, they lie, ready to receive a birth of fly and maggot. But the lifting fog is a trail becoming from the non-soul's heat. The organs stop. All instinct from inside them now furring air with whitish veil, shadows trick of weight. Here is where the dead live on, ghost animals, in a world called Winter Hill. They become a floating pond, a threshold of in-between, moist portal where water finds water and fixes to air. There. Thanks so much for listening. It's really been a wonderful experience of sharing this poetry with you, everyone here. And I'll just finish with this poem now. There is a stir always. If I hold onto this body, the snow will grow inside me, and the winter of my cells will flake into tiny crystals like six-figured gods, each arrow tip attempting to make the point of something as tears flow. There is a stir always. I rise to the cold to take my place among the fragile stars and sleep. Thank you.